listening to The Kula Ring, a podcast made for manufacturing marketers. Here are Carman Perry and Jeff White.
Welcome to The Kula Ring, a podcast for manufacturing marketers brought to you by Kula Partners. My name is Jeff White, and joining me today is Carman Perry. Carman, how you doing, sir?
I'm doing well and happy to be here once again.
Yeah, me too. Interested to chat with our guest today.
Absolutely. I mean, anytime that we can get the benefit, frankly, let's just be selfish for a minute. Anytime that we can get the benefit of having somebody with 28 years experience in the semiconductor space on the show, we want to take advantage of that. And frankly, it's nice that our listeners get to take advantage of it as well.
Yeah, no, certainly when your career spans that many years, and it's not, we're old too, so it's cool.
Yeah, we should note that 28 years, while it sounds like it's a good chunk of experience, it is not that long, and our guest is still incredibly young. Yeah.
Yep, exactly. And probably, and certainly very good looking and all of that too. So we can throw all the accolades there.
And my guess is better looking and younger than both of us. So there you go.
Yeah, there we go. Yeah. Not normally how we do an intro, but joining us today is Thomas Lewis. And Thomas has been a marketing executive, as you mentioned, 28 years experience in the semiconductor industry. I'm really looking forward to what you have to say to our guest today, Thomas. Welcome to the Kula Ring.
Thank you, Jeff. Thank you, Carmen. And wow, what a wonderful introduction that was. I need to take you guys everywhere with me.
Yes, which is exactly the kind of thing somebody says when they haven't taken us anywhere. Thomas, it's awesome to have you on the show. And I want to kind of just let's start by introducing our listeners to a little bit more fully to you and your background, kind of where you've worked, et cetera. Just give us a bit of texture there.
Sure. So, as you said, I've been in the semiconductor industry my entire career post-education. I've spent the majority of my time at Texas Instruments. That was 26 years. And I've also had some time with Analog Devices. And in both of those companies, I was really, really blessed, having lots of different experiences, all inside of marketing and sales, the majority directly in marketing. And it's been a really wonderful ride. I think it was Jeff who said in the introduction, being able to see the world. That certainly was a big part of my career. I spent a 2-year plus expat position in Germany, which was definitely a highlight of not just my career, but of my life. That was a wonderful experience. And I've been exposed to be cliche, the 4 Ps of marketing. I've had roles that had to do with every element of marketing I can possibly think of, and enjoyed every minute of it.
That's fantastic, and it's that must be an incredible experience to get a chance to hone your craft with colleagues in Germany, like you're in another continent getting exposed to a different kind of business climate, even though it's within the same company, of course. That's how long did you say that you were in Germany again? Was it 2 years?
Yes, in total it was roughly 2.5, because they also included as the precursor to that official assignment, what they call a long-term assignment, which, let's be honest, and to even no matter what time frame you're talking about, because this was back in 2003, 2005 timeframe, a long-term assignment is a quarter, right? Every company thinks in quarter cycles. So I had a long-term assignment there for a quarter, came back and reported some things that could use work, and that resulted in the expat assignment that lasted a little bit short of 2 years.
That's very cool. Really cool. Thomas, I think as we're talking about today's show and your varied background and like you say, really working across the 4 Ps, there was a kind of a nugget or a thread, if you will, that seemed like it just weaved throughout the way that you approach thinking about marketing and working within the field. This notion of being all in, and I would really love to spend some time unpacking that.
I love to. So, all in is a phrase that many people use. I'm all in when you're talking about getting alignment. Recently, I've been reflecting, as one might do, about the entire length of my career, and the teams that really excelled, who not only performed well, but achieved things that a lot of folks didn't think were possible, including sometimes maybe even those teams themselves. And I uncovered, when looking back on those teams and the teams that didn't fare so well, there were three things that, when they're all present and they all come together, result in extraordinary performance and results. And it's an acronym. It all, in my use of the word here, the A stands for accountability, and we can unpack that because there's a lot there. Your best teams, to summarize that thought, hold themselves accountable. They don't even necessarily need someone else doing it. There's a natural inclination, and especially in marketing, this can sometimes get tricky. Measuring the impact of marketing activities, a marketing ROI, if you will, is not a simple exercise. And the ones that do it and do it well and learn from that and continue to improve are the ones that excel. So that's what the first A stands for.
It's I want to kind of pick on that just a little bit, because I don't know if I'm forming the thought as I'm saying it, so this may make no sense. As but it seems like there's almost two types of ways that marketers think about accountability, or two different types of accountable marketers, maybe. And one seems like they go out looking for information or looking for data to prove that what they've been doing is actually working. So they're not necessarily interested in changing what they're doing. They're interested in finding a way to prove that it was a good idea. And then there are others that are more genuinely humble about it and open about the notion that not everything I do is going to work. And even though it worked last week doesn't mean it's going to work this week. And they approach that notion of accountability or ROI calculation, et cetera, with a more of a, I don't know, a bit more of an honest lens, it seems. Is that a distinction that you've encountered, or am I just making it up?
You are not making it up, and you nailed it. There is an old saying that you can have data backing you up by the way you create the data. You can find data to prove any decision, really, that you want to. We have an abundance of data in today's world. So typically, if you really want to, you can manipulate data to show anything you want it to. The best marketers, and really the best employees, don't do that. They do it the opposite way. Instead of looking at data after they've done something and searching for data that proves what they've done was effective, you start upstream and you say, before the project, the activity, the campaign starts, this is what we want to achieve. And you set the goal, and the goal, of course, should be tied to a higher level objective. Expression sometimes used as cascaded goals. So the corporation at the highest levels, to their shareholders, have goals. Earnings per share, what is our earnings reports going to be? What's the breakdown by industry? And all of that should ultimately cascade all the way down to, how many impressions do I want this ad to have? How many contacts do I want that to generate? How many of those do I want to result in an actual lead that we follow through and earn the business? And all of that ties together. And to your notion of which way to go about it that ultimately results in the most success, it's being honest and transparent and setting the goals up front, reporting on it. And the most important part of this is learning from it. So it didn't get what we wanted. Why not? And did we maybe get something unexpected that's really good? That's another thing that sometimes happens, is you set your goals and you look back on it and you're like, well, that didn't happen, but this did. And let's learn from the extraordinary on either side. Something really amazing happened. Let's keep doing that on the next thing we do. And this didn't quite work out the way we thought it would. Where was our thinking flawed? And what will we do different next time? So what you said to start off this part of the conversation is exactly the way I feel about it.
Yeah, and I don't really want to beat up on marketers too much because, of course, I feel like the organizations almost set them up to be in a defensive position. Like, if marketers were actually being truthful about the likelihood of the success of any particular single initiative, and they're being transparent about that, they may feel that they may not get, it may not even get the green light to happen, and like that there's a sense, I think, in a lot of organizations, particularly engineering heavy organizations, which of course is often where we play, that they desire a level of certainty that may not always exist in the realm of marketing and sales. As much as it is a more data-driven game these days, it's not fully data predictable.
Thanks for bringing it up because that brings up two things. One is I like when I'm setting goals and making commitments to what we're going to try to deliver. I like to use an Excel spreadsheet approach, and it can be any tool, just using that as one, where the variables can be changed. So imagine a goal spreadsheet that says, okay, I'm going to assume A, B, C, D. I'm going to tell you what those assumptions are. And if you disagree, like if you think that's not going to happen, the variables are right there and you can change it and see the outcome, how it would be different. And that is one of the ways that I feel brings more integrity, more accountability into the process because you allow others to say, I don't agree with the assumption that you made there. Maybe as a for example, that 10% of all contacts will result in an identified project we can go in. You don't agree with that number? No problem. Change it in the spreadsheet and here's the outcome. Another thing you mentioned I think is really important is if you're working in an engineering driven industry like semiconductors, it absolutely is. I've found that even when the data or the results aren't what everyone would want, they welcome the data. That's the world they live in, right? The true engineers, they are constantly driven by data. And if you walk into a room and you're asking for money to be invested in a marketing project of some type, and if you don't have that data, both backward looking, so what data can we collect on what we've already done that might give us some runway on what could happen here, and then give regular updates, you actually quickly lose your support from the business units, from upper executives. They need and crave that data. And without it, it becomes a lot of opinions and a lot of speculation on what's going to happen.
But man, like there's an awful lot of situations where you really need to have the humility, both in marketing, I guess, and in life, to say we're going to do these things, we're going to pull these levers, but we're not 100% sure what's going to happen. Like we've seen success like this in the past, or I've run campaigns like this at other organizations, or I've done this in other ways, and this was the result. But it's almost like, in a lot of ways, the kind of the marketing machine, the SaaS companies and all of those that are kind of like pushing the power of their tools and all of that, are almost setting us up for failure in some ways. Not for failure, but to look like we have more information than maybe we do, especially when we're starting out.
Or that it's
You
more
know,
predictable than it actually is.
yeah, like there's a lot more nuance to it than that, and in all honesty, we'd probably do well to sometimes say, we're not 100% sure where this is going to go, but this is what our models are telling us, and we'll see once we run it. But you like you said, you do have to have that confidence walking into the C-suite to say, like, it's we think that's going to do this, but I'm not 100% sure.
But I like what Thomas said there about the dispassionate nature of the spreadsheet approach, right? Oh, well,
Yeah.
you don't agree with this assumption? It's baked in. It's one of 5 that's baked into this hypothesis of where we might go. Well, we can adjust that and we can see the output of it. At least it provides a nice basis for the conversation, and one that isn't exclusively predicated just on somebody's opinion or feelings that day.
And Jeff, your point is a nice bridge into what the first L stands for as well, which, to let that out of the bag, is loyalty. And it's loyalty on multiple different levels. Sure, at a person-to-person level, but also around the project. And to get another word that people like to use is buy-in. And what you're describing is the process of getting that buy-in. It's easier, to your point. It's easier to walk in and put a lot of projections down and to do a sell, if you will, to sell your marketing campaign. Short term, that is an easier road to go. And you hope, which is never a good strategy, but you hope it's successful, and then that gives you the runway to get the next project out and the next campaign. The issue with that approach is if it doesn't work out and you didn't get buy-in, and now everyone's pointing at you being the marketing arm that's proposing these. And something I found that's useful is all of the business units in the semiconductor business, they all have ROIs. They make bets too, right? They bet on their next project. They work with customers, they define the next semiconductor they want to do, and they make a ton of assumptions. How many of those will go into each end equipment? The customers I'm working with, what will their market share be? Um, all kinds of assumptions are also baked into their ROIs, and they invest millions of dollars per semiconductor they release. And so I found that that plays well when you're in a meeting and you're getting questions about, for lack of a better term, the risk that you're doing. You want to invest $1 million, $2 million. Those are big marketing campaigns, right? You get to that kind of a level. And I like to level set it when I can feel that tension in the room and say, well, remember, on our last single semiconductor project, we invested whatever the number is, 5 million. And we also had the same level of uncertainty. Our lead customer, their idea, what they want, it doesn't always work out. I mean, that is part of business, is taking, I like to call it educated risk, balanced risk, that is knowledgeable going into it on what is the likelihood. And back to those variables that we were talking about, that also allows people to play with the levers and say, well, what do you think are the minimums and maximums? Again, engineers, back to data sheets. What is the minimum that we've ever seen in terms of impressions or contacts? What's the maximum? What's the most likely? You can play with all those variables, and you can make, at the end of the day, a educated guesstimation on what that pipeline is that you're going to uncover for your sales team that could result in design wins and revenue. And you can do it with confidence. If you take your time, you can say the minimum we should get out of this campaign is this, the maximum is this, and the most likely is this. And that process is not easy. It can take months to get everyone bought in. However, without it, you can have accountability and no loyalty to the program, to what you're doing, and you will still not have a winning team. You need both working together.
So you're talking about loyalty to the process.
Yes, and to each other. That's a second part of it, but yes, well, to the process.
Yeah, but man, there was I don't know if I've mentioned him on this podcast before, because I mentioned him a fair bit. But there's an old salesperson I used to work with, that sales leader. He was there was a lot of annoying things about him in a lot of ways, but you're always the organization worked large deals. Like, it wasn't uncommon for it to be $1 million deal, a $2 million deal, or what have you, and strong relationship, sales, etc. So there's times when people feel like they're getting a bit of a shortcut. Like, oh, I know I'm in with John or Joe over here, and I've got so somebody on the sales team would try to skip a couple of steps in the process, right? And he was always a stickler, like, no, you follow every step along this process, because we know what comes out the other end of it. We're loyal to the process regardless of what we're encountering in this individual situation. And it took a remarkable level of discipline, but it was also remarkable the number of times I saw that pay off. That loyalty to the process of the program at hand, and that stick-to-itiveness really just is what ended up making the difference. So it's interesting to hear you kind of talk about that through the lens of a marketing team, a marketing organization.
Loyalty to the process can also result in loyalty to each other. And it's the subject of many a Dilbert cartoon. This tension, if you will, between sales, engineering, and marketing, those three functions. And when you're in the semiconductor business, those are the three teams you need bought in. And the only way that you will get sustained loyalty is having integrity in what you're talking about and being honest about, hey, this is the investment. If nothing goes right, this is the downside. This is the lowest return we're likely to get. This is the highest, and to be accurate in that, because when you do that over and over and over again, when you get to like the fourth time you do it, management and everyone else has faith in what you're saying. We've seen this process, we've seen the commitment, we've seen the pre-work done upstream, and we're confident. They're asking for $1 million and they're saying it's going to return at a minimum 5, at a maximum 20, and we're confident that that's true because they've used the same process and already done that 3 or 4 times.
Let's talk a bit about that relationship because, in an industry like semiconductors or any highly technical industry, that relationship between marketing, sales, and engineering is paramount. And not just with your internal engineers, but also your salespeople's discussions with your customers' engineers. And it's almost like it goes beyond the organization itself and spreads to the getting buy-in from every level of engineering in both firms. So how do you, as a marketer working with sales and working with engineering, help to bridge that divide and make sure that everybody is working together and that they are all in together on that?
I believe the answer to your question starts with listening before you say anything. Really understanding, especially if you've never worked in either one of those, meaning if you're a true blood marketing person and you've never been in sales and you've never been in an engineering role, and I've been blessed that I have been in both, you have to take the time to understand their language, their careabouts, their goals before you ever approach them with the sell of what you want to do. It's super critical because it allows you to be able to, well, it's actually very similar to the sales process itself, right? With a customer. You can't just go in and say, well, you could, but your success rate's lower, to go in and say, oh, my product's A, B, C, D. Well, they might not care about B, and you lose them when you talk about B for 20 minutes. The important part is to know, what do they really care about, and focus on that. And so my answer to your question would be, start by listening, really understand their long-term and short-term goals. Make sure whatever you're proposing has a logical progression from what you're doing, your, to use product language, your features to their benefits. Your campaign, your marketing project has features. It has things you're going to be doing, whether that's a webcast or a webinar or an event you want to go to. Those are the things you're doing. But what are the benefits to your community, the sales team? What is it they care about? So that would be my short answer to what you were asking.
I want to know what the last L is in this all in
Oh,
acronym.
the last L. The last L stands for love. And I said it that way on purpose to be a little cheeky. However, most people would call that passion, right? In a business professional setting, we don't use the word love. We use the word passion. Are you passionate about what you do? The reason I don't use the word passion, other than it would mess up the acronym, I don't think ALP sounds quite as good as,
Yeah, Alp in does not work nearly as well.
Certainly not in North America.
yeah, right. Maybe something else somewhere else, right? Um, the reason that I do it, other than that, is love also indicates things like empathy, inclusivity, respect for personal boundaries. I've been on teams that had the first two. They had the accountability down. They had a process. They were maniacally honest, and they had loyalty. But what was missing was that last L. And what happens is, in the short term, those teams do really well. The accountability, loyal, checkmark teams that have no love do well for 2 to 3 years, but then something starts to happen. Things like burnout, right? If you have no respect for personal boundaries, people will work incredibly long hours and they burn out. And that's one of the ways that teams long term don't succeed. Empathy is another, because if you don't have empathy for the other functions, you're in marketing, back to that conversation, and you don't have empathy for what it's like to have a sales goal, what it's like to have your personal paycheck tied to whether or not you win that business, right? That's a very different mindset that marketers can lose if they've never been in it. You can quickly lose the empathy for why it matters so much. It's not just a number, a goal that seems important to hit. It's impacting their families. And the last is inclusivity. And most people, they talk about inclusivity typically in very textbook ways, meaning, do we have people from varied races? Do we have a good mix of men, women, people who identify as trans? Like, do we have, diversity that way? Of course, that's important. I'm going broader than that. And I learned this from my time in Germany. Inclusivity of thought, not shutting down someone who approaches a problem or a situation differently. As a matter of fact, when you sense that's happening, love it. Sit in it, even if it's uncomfortable. Let the other person air what it is, because sometimes, and I'd say frequently, right, when you get into those moments, you don't actually incorporate what they're saying if they're really a fringe opinion. However, what I have seen is when you let it get aired, it does one of two things. One, it points out a very low probability, but an outlier situation that could occur, and it brainstorms something else. Or two, it cements the original idea. And if you shut down that idea, it actually runs counter to what you're trying to do, right? You're trying to get your agenda through. And someone interrupts your meeting, like, oh, what about this? If you let them talk it out, a lot of times it's only helping you because everyone else in the room is hearing what you're hearing. I'm like, this doesn't make any sense. So let them air it out because they're helping you by pointing out the opposite side that really cements what you want to do. So it's love for freedom of expression. It's love for allowing people space to get their opinions out. And it's really important to the long-term health of teams that can have sustained runs of 5, 10 years of amazing results.
I was really taken with the notion, the way you described inclusivity of thought. I must say, I thought that it was the all in, and the in was just going to be like an add on. I didn't know that in was going to also stand for inclusivity. So this made the all in thing even tighter. Um, I guess what I liked about that is that it feels to me that it really asks the marketing leader to say, you need to design in advance for inclusivity of thought, and how you even build out those meetings, and how you think about how you interact with those teams. Um, the structure of the meetings that you create, etc., will determine the extent to which you experience said inclusivity of thought or not. You can almost by mistake shut it down because you hold things too tightly or what have you, or just design those engagements in certain ways. So that's really something interesting to ponder to me. That to your point, Thomas, really does push beyond um, the more common notions of simply diversity, equity, and inclusion that we often think of.
It also extends to recruiting and developing and retaining your employees. When you're going out and you're looking for folks, I think it's important to, when you're interviewing, when someone clearly is standing out and is different than the rest of the team that you have today. And look, this is not easy. Interviewing it is certainly an art. It's not a science, and you don't have much time to try to figure out who the person is sitting across from you. However, I always become interested in someone when they say something I haven't thought of, or especially if they run up against me, if they have some counter thoughts to what I have. Because again, it's what's the saying? Iron strengthens iron, right? I think I got that right. I might have messed it up a little bit, but this concept sharpens iron, right? It's this idea that good ideas being pushed up against other good ideas only make both better, and to welcome that. And so I think it's important from the very jump who you hire, and you can develop it too. It's a misnomer that you cannot, in my opinion, that you cannot develop an approach to problem solving that is around different modes of thought. And I have found that one of the most effective things I can do in any meeting I'm in is to leave time at the end. And this is hard sometimes to do, especially if you're presenting an idea you want to do. But in team meetings, it's very easy to do, your staff meetings, is to leave enough time at the end to literally just go around and say, is there anything, Jeff, that you want to share with the team? Anything that's a problem, an obstacle, an opportunity you're seeing? And if you don't leave time for that to happen as the manager, frequently two things happen. A great idea is missed out on. A problem that everyone's dealing with and no one's talking about is swept under the rug. And your team doesn't feel important. It's like you took up all the airtime and there's no time at the end for people to air whatever's going on in their world and their experience. So I've always left time at the end of my staff meetings for sure to allow for that just kind of open, hey, is there anything? What do you got?
Well, since you brought it up, Thomas.
Yes, Jeff. What do you got?
At the end of Kula's monthly all hands meetings, we have a slide at the very end of the deck. We recently moved it a little sooner so that we can end on more positive notes, but we have the airing of the grievances opportunity. And, you never know what could come out of that. But it's almost, if something is said, it's almost always better to have it out in the open. And
suggestion, maybe change it to airing of the grievances and opening of the opportunities. It's both. Frequently people have ideas. They have, just like me, you're walking your dog and an idea hits you. And if you don't have someone instigate a conversation, we all forget them. We'll have these great ideas. And then if someone doesn't say, hey, Thomas, what have you been thinking about lately? Well, another idea rolls in, or I get very tactical and get into, I've got to get this deadline done. And by leaving those doors open, you not only get the grievances, the process, it's usually a process thing, Jeff, that you need to improve, but it also opens up, wow, I haven't even thought about that. If we did that, we could get this.
Well, it is in my nature to have a lot of grievances, but I can tell you I do not have any grievances about this podcast. It's been great to have you on the show, Thomas. Thank you for joining.
It's genuinely been a pleasure. Thank you very much for having me.
Great to chat with you.
Thanks for listening to The Kula Ring with Carman Perry and Jeff White. Don't miss a single manufacturing marketing insight. Subscribe now at kulapartners.com/The Kula Ring. That's KULApartners.com/The Kula Ring.